morning. Oh my God, it's freezing. Hi, we are live. Welcome to Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. We are meeting in a fairly abbreviated fashion, but I thought it would be worth having 15 minutes with Tanya to clarify a provision in the cannabis bill H270, which has in section 6 addresses the public records law. And given Tanya is our queen of public records, I thought it made some sense to have Tanya weigh in on this request to have certain pieces of the cannabis law exempt from public scrutiny. So Tanya, have you had a chance to look at section 6 in the bill?
Yeah, so for the record, I'm Tanya Marshall, State Archivist and Chief Records Officer, Director of the Vermont State Archives and Records Administration as well. So I did read the bill and I looked at that particular section, and I have some recommendations related to the Public Records Act. It's mainly just wording, and I am happy to work with the drafts person to facilitate that. And then I have some recommendations for the committee as well. It wouldn't change the substance of that, but it would just help kind of keep in sync with the way the act is worded.
Great. And so Michelle Childs is the drafter of this. We don't have her available with us right now, but if you'd be kind enough to be in touch with Michelle and propose the language. So what would you be proposing?
Yeah, so one thing that just kind of strikes me within this particular bill is on page 8, lines 11 and also lines 14, is that the definition of public record in the Public Records Act is written or recorded information that's produced or acquired in the course of an agency's business. So it doesn't mean anything about confidential or non-confidential. The word public just means government, for lack of a better term on this. So that language there kind of implies that the word public means not confidential. So it's a kind of misphrasing of the terminology, particularly when it talks about shall be a public record, because everything that's created or received by the Cannabis Control Board is a public record. That's the Public Records Act. So those are just some minor changes on that. The other recommendations I would have on this is that, it is about the General Assembly outlining specifically what the exemption is for that. And so there's different ways to word it. So it's very clear that, the General Assembly, if this is the intent, is saying that if there's a complaint or if there's an investigation, the intent of the General Assembly is now to not allow that information to be made for public inspection and copying. So it's just different ways to clean that up so it's clearer for the board and the members of the public to understand if that's the intent of the General Assembly. So it's just the wording of it where you start with.
I just want to focus people on this. Is in section C primarily, which is where we on page 8, Randy, of the cannabis of H270, and the Cannabis Control Board is asking with the bill asks that we exempt from public records any records related to licensed security, these sections 1 and 2. And so that, Tanya, is what you're requesting, to have some cleanup done on that language.
Yeah, it's more the reference. One is on page 8 on line 11, where it says as defined shall be public. That word is something that we don't typically see, because the word public in public record means that it's a government record. It doesn't talk about confidentiality. And then also on line 14, where it says, this is related to the list, where it says the list contained in the list, information, contained in the list shall be a public record. That's implying that the definition of public record means not confidential, where the definition of public record just means that it's created or received in the course of agency business. Yeah, and then when I looked at it, there's ways, like I said, it won't change the intent, but it will make it cleaner for both the board and for members of the public. When you look at where it says the following shall be exempt from public inspection and copying underneath the Public Records Act and shall be kept confidential, that's in line with that. When you get to section D, the way it's worded can be more clear on what the General Assembly is intending as the actual exemption. So if the exemption is a complaint or investigation that does not result in an action, it's clearer to say that than to say several lines of the opposite, if that makes sense. And then the only other recommendation I have is that it's odd to, in legislation, to also have a directive to a board to create a record inside the actual exemption language. So this is where the aggregated list is listed. I think it would be easier to, if there is a mandate from the General Assembly to create this type of list, there's different parts in the bill that could be added as a directive to the board. And then you could streamline the language. It would still fall underneath that complaint or investigation that is not formal action, and you don't need the extra language related to the identity of the subjects, because if you're doing that exemption on that complaint or investigation that does not result in a formal action, that information wouldn't become available either.
Right.
So I'm not weighing in on the actual exemption part of it, but it's more the style of the way that we review as we review a lot of statutes related to the statewide records and information management program. So we also field a lot of questions from different entities about how to interpret. So this is just my recommendation in looking at that particular section. And if there's additional questions, I'm happy to answer them. But as mentioned, I'm happy to work directly with the drafts person. That typically is what I'm asked to do.
I think that would be great. And then let's open up to questions. Yeah. Anybody have questions?
I mean, just to clarify that I understand what's happening. It sounds as if Tanya, if it's okay to call you Tanya, that you don't have a concern about the intent. It's just the language needs to be more clear.
Right.
Yeah, I typically don't weigh in on intent unless legislators would like to know how it compares to other areas of exemptions that have been, put forth on an investigation or complaint. And I didn't look at it in the context of other areas that would have that, but it's not uncommon for exemptions to already exist. If, there is a complaint, but there's no finding of an issue, then typically, trying to protect the right to privacy, which is part of the Public Records Act, which is what this seemed to be intended on. It's more the stylistic aspects of it, because when we see shall be a public record, that starts making it seem like the definition of public record means open for inspection and copying, when the definition is really just saying it's a government record. It's not my personal records. If I create or produce something as a public servant or a public official, that's kind of the definition of public record.
So my understanding is on line 11, it really is that it simply shall be public is really shall not be confident, would not be considered confidential. And you and Michelle will come back to us with language that
it doesn't even need to have that particular word, because what you're doing in this section is you're itemizing what is not to be provided for public inspection and copying. So it can be really cleaned up to just be clear. And the original law that's getting repealed has that language, and one is kind of clear, records related to, and then there's even records related to investigations. 2 and 1 could essentially be combined, and records related to complaints and investigations that do not result in formal action. It's just a cleaner way to provide that.
Right. Thank you. Oh, this is helpful. So in C, it does it more, it does it sort of more in line and in sync with what we normally do, in terms of language. But D is where we have the cleanup.
I do have another question, if you don't mind, just because this is the first time I've dealt with this stuff. So I'm thinking about the Giglio. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but there are lists that are kept confidential that maybe shouldn't be kept confidential. So just generally, my understanding on this is if someone is being or has been investigated, but nothing has been found, the public will not know that they were investigated.
That is essentially what this legislation is saying. I'm
Okay,
happy to.
This is saying unless something is found and there is a formal action taken, it will then become public.
Yes, I understand, but I'm just, as a policy question, and I don't even know that I necessarily believe in this, but I just think it's worth discussing. Someone being investigated might be worthy of public knowledge as opposed to not being investigated. I mean, many times there's an in-between, it's not, things aren't always,
True, and the Cannabis Control Board would have to answer that for you. This is what they are requesting.
Okay.
And after living with this for a bit, I think what they're finding, and we have this in other areas where trade secrets are kept.
trade
so
secrets, I
there are trade
understand, but
secrets,
it's.
and there are records related to
Yeah.
investigations.
Trade secrets, I understand, and
Right.
that's has a different reason.
And I
But-
think when we have Bryn in tomorrow, we could ask that question in C2, which says that what would be confidential are records related to investigations until the point where there is an action taken and that investigation goes forward and there is clearly wrongdoing. It's not unlike some of our panels here. Things only become public once they have determined there is fire where there has been smoke. I
You
mean,
won't know
Well,
there's
well,
been
this-
complaints brought against someone until one of them, the
Until there's
ethics board says, yeah, there's substance.
So that's worth.
yeah, I think
But
we
we
need
can
Bryn.
talk with another person.
Yeah.
Sure, thank
So
you.
I think that's a good question for Win.
And I can comment too, that the way this is worded, it's just closed. And so it's not even if something, so I'm happy to provide examples of other exemptions or non-exemptions for the same similar, I wasn't sure what your questions would be today, so I tried to anticipate as well as I could. But I'm happy to do that work. So, Senator Harrison, if you have that question, like how often do we say, because if you think about different areas for, establishments, retail or restaurants and health, how are those handled if there's a complaint? Is that information made available? And I'm happy to provide those other examples to let you know. And again, it's not for me to necessarily weigh in. My role and job here is to provide you with examples of your legislation, and then the General Assembly has more information to make a determination on which direction it would like to take.
Great. And given our time frame, maybe you two could follow up with email. I would love to ask you if you'd follow up, Tanya, with Michelle Childs, because we are trying to vote this out by the end of the week. And so if we could have this as part of the amendments we're going to be looking at tomorrow, that would be great if you wouldn't mind emailing her today.
Sure. Do you mind if I
That would
just
be great.
reference that I met with the committee so she has context for that? Okay.
And we'll let Scott and I'll let her know that.
Okay.
Great. And that you have permission to be in touch. That would be great.
Yes. And then
Terrific.
I have some draft language that I already have prepared it for examples if she
Great.
wants to consider those. And then would you like me to look at other examples of
Yeah. If you
complaints
had-
and
if you had a couple to
investigations?
if you had a couple to email us, that would be great. I think it would be interesting.
Sure.
It would help our
Happy-
conversation with Britt.
Happy to
Sure.
do that. And I
But
can do that by close of business today and have that sent
Oh,
over
that's great.
sometime.
Any other questions for Tanya? Right. Tanya, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
You are, as always, a great resource.
Well, thank
And,
you.
thanks so much.
Thank you.
And, yes, and Keisha is with us also, which is great. There she is. So I think we can adjourn and go off.
We have an opportunity.
Oh, yes, we
for
have our
Casey
opportunity to vote Wendy night. Yes, to add, we kept our, goodbye, Tanya, thank you.
Thanks, Tanya.
Um,
You might hear a little
so-
crying in the background, so that's why I was on mute.
Well,
Yes.
we can be quick.
No, you already voted.
And, yeah, this is a extension of the vote that was taken on for
Right, we kept it
21,
open for-
23 to confirm Commissioner Wendy Knight to the Department of Liquor and Lottery. So far, Senator Brock, Clarkson, Cummings, and Harrison have voted yes. Senator Ram Hinsdale, how do you
I'm a
vote?
yes.
Thank you. Okay, so it is 5-0-0.
Great, thank you. And
Thanks for holding that open.
be reporting all 3 of our commissioners and secretary on the floor on Friday.
Okay.
Great.
Done. Yep. they're there.
Great, and I have, and Randy, I don't know if Randy has gotten his numbers. Okay, great. Terrific.
Baby.
I did my plumbers, but the other guy, there wasn't a good contact information for him.
Okay, so if you'd let Scott know that, we'll
Okay.
get that from the administration, try
Okay.
and get a cell phone or something.
So
Okay.
we'll all tell Scott who we have reached and we can confirm those folks on Friday. And then
Yeah, and we
see
have
if we can get.
And I've got, we've got, you and I can chat about if you want to do them from Zoom. I have them all set to go on their confirmation.
Oh, gosh.
So we
No,
have
I hope someone else wants to do them. I think that would be great.
we're set, we can divvy them up.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
And I learned from mine, so I want to share a little bit of what I learned, if that's okay.
Oh, great.
Oh, we'll, about those are not on the floor.
Good.
They're
Okay.
just the secretary. and the
Yeah,
2
no, I just want to talk to you guys.
Great.
Okay.
Terrific.
Awesome.
Thank you, Keisha.
Thank
And
you.
thank you on live. Keisha, if you want to stick for a social hello, but let's go off live and adjourn for the
Sure.
day. We're